Okay, so we are recording now. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation about celebrating financial independence. I'm so happy that we have our guest speaker, Mrs. Diane Stewart. She comes from the Enable organization, the outreach. She's an outreach specialist, and she will share with us important information about the Enable Act in the state of Alabama. And I'm just gonna pass the microphone to her. So I will ask all attendees that if they could mute themselves and wait for the end of the presentation to ask questions so that we could get as much information as possible. Also, by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to share the PowerPoint with you guys so that you guys could have access later on. So Mrs. Stewart, will you please let us know a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so thank you very, very much for letting me join your meeting. As I mentioned, that this is the highlight of my day to be able to do presentations, and I've missed that. So I'm glad that we're doing Zoom meetings, and I have a tool at the bank where we do webinars. So this is just a pleasure for me to present to you. I am the Enable Outreach Specialist. I work for First National Bank, and we were honored to win the RFP in Alabama, so that I am able to be the outreach specialist in Nebraska and in Alabama. And we were actually one of the first 3 states to offer an ABLE plan. So I am thrilled to be able to do a presentation to you all. And Maria, thank you for your technology support, because Maria is going to go through the slides and we will go over the basics of ABLE and kind of then drill down into the Enable Savings Plan of Alabama. I do have some recent stats that I looked at that will be probably interesting for you as far as what are Alabamians doing, what do they invest in, and the average age. So I'll get into that a little bit further, but without further ado, I would say the next slide would be perfect. Thank you very much. So the agenda today is the overview to talk about the eligibility and ownership types. We'll drill down into qualified disability expenses and also cover the impact to benefits. The qualified disability expenses, I'm going to give a couple practical examples how it relates to students in school, kind of something that would be relative for you all. Next slide, please. So what is ABLE? It is a state-sponsored tax advantage savings program for qualified disability expenses. It does not impact eligibility for resource-based benefits. So this is a really important program for individuals. Since we're working from home and COVID times, I have been helping people enroll online, and we talk through that because that stimulus check, for example, really threw a curveball into some people's financial situations because now they're over-resourced. So one option for that stimulus check is to put the money in the Enable Savings Plan of Alabama. And I'll talk a little bit more about that stimulus check in just a little bit. But the Enable account permits eligible individuals to save more than $2,000 in their name. The annual contribution limit is capped at $15,000. However, for those individuals that work, they can contribute their earned income beyond that $15,000. I'm just going to do a check. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up. Is that all right? Very good. There is a form on our website that, thank you, that people would need to complete in order to allow them to contribute beyond the $15,000. So that's just something I advise people. Otherwise, since it's capped at 15, if they tried to do over 15,000, the contribution would not be allowed. It is designed to supplement, not supplant SSI and Medicaid benefits. So for those individuals that are receiving benefits, they can certainly take advantage of the avenues for spending, but definitely Enable is really helpful for individuals for supplement. I talked to someone yesterday and he needs a new wheelchair, for example, and Medicaid would not pay for that. So he can tap into his Enable Alabama account for that. One thing on this slide too, is that HUD will disregard amounts in the ABLE account. That was something that we were hoping to get a guidance letter on. We just finally received that about a year or so ago. For those individuals that receive subsidized housing, ABLE is not considered an asset or income. Next slide, please. So eligibility, who is eligible? It is defined as someone of any age, child, youth, or adult, but the key component is that the disability onset is prior to age 26. They are entitled to receive SSI or SSDI. They do not need to be receiving the benefit, but they would be entitled to the benefits. Or maybe perhaps they have a certification from a physician indicating a marked or severe functional limitation. Now, I do want to point out, and that's the last paragraph on this slide, it's a self-certification process. I had somebody I was helping with enrollment, and she said, oh, I can't find my doctor's certification for my child. You know, I need to wait till I find that to enroll. And no, she does not. She can go ahead and enroll. The enrollment form, there are boxes that mark the basis of disability, but we do not need the copy of a certification. We do not need documentation for that. It's a self-certification process. This is where I'm going to throw in a stat for Alabama. I'm going to look at my little sheet here. So Alabama, the average age for an account owner is age 38. The youngest person is 2, and the oldest is age 84. And I point that out because I had somebody, she actually was an employee at the bank, and she said, it was like an aha moment. She goes, I have a friend that is 34, but her disability was prior to age 34. It was, she was born with cerebral palsy, and she said she would be eligible. And I said, yes, most definitely. It's prior to age 26, but the age is can vary. So it can be someone beyond that. Just the basis of the eligibility is prior to their 26th birthday. All right, next slide, please. So I have seen 3 different ways that people can open an account, and it is a really easy online enrollment process for those parents who have a minor child or for someone who is their own guardian. I talked to a young man yesterday, the individual who actually needs the new wheelchair, and he is his own guardian, so he can go online and enroll. He's an adult with a disability. In those instances where it is an individual with a disability who is an adult, but they are not able to manage their affairs, then we do need the paper enrollment completed along with the documentation from the guardian, power of attorney, conservator, you know, whatever entity that is. We need a copy of that legal documentation verifying that they have the ability to manage the financial affairs for this individual. So those are the 3 ways that I see ownership type. There is only one ABLE account allowed. The eligible individual is the account owner and the beneficiary. So I have been walking through people, walking through the enrollment process, and I'm happy to do that. If you ever know anyone that says, I really want someone to sit down and walk through it with me. I talked to someone the other day and we went page by page, and he said, I appreciate you doing that. I've just got a lot on my plate. You know, it's not really a difficult process. However, you know, there are questions as people fill this out, and they want to make sure they're filling it out correctly. All right, next slide. This is the slide that I love because there are so many reasons, so many qualified disability purposes, and so many reasons that you can use this. So I like to drill down with education, and I took a couple notes. So let's talk about education a little bit. That can be, I like to give examples. It can be your computer, it can be your tablet, it can be tuition, fees, transportation costs associated with school. So books. So for school, there's a lot of different things within that category. So really good practical examples. Transportation, I helped a young man who was going off to school. He's considered legally blind. He can use it for all those school expenses I just mentioned, but he also would need Uber transportation on the campus. So car payment, plane, train, Uber transportation, housing is a qualified disability expense. I like to tell this story too. Those of you that might know Anita Kelly from the State Treasurer's Office told me this story, and I love this story because it relates to the Alabama plan. The first individual that opened a plan in Alabama was saving for a therapy dog. You might know this story. And someone was very well intended and started a GoFundMe account for her, but that put her over resources. So the GoFundMe account was liquidated and added to the very first Enable Alabama account. And I was so honored to be able to meet this individual and her therapy dog. So I love that story. So personal support services, the therapy dog is a really good example. Employment training and supports, we can drill down in that because you might have individuals that are employed, and practical examples of that would be if they have an employer that requires a work uniform but they don't pay for it, they can use their work uniform, work boots, any kind of training, transportation costs going to that training. So all those would fall in the employment training and support category. Assistive technology, I told this gentleman this yesterday, and he was really excited because his cell phone was a really bad connection. He needs a new cell phone. Assistive technology, cell phone, that is a great expense that's qualified. Financial management, administrative services, legal fees. Now I like to point out, once again, I mentioned that the maximum contribution limit to it's actually the ABLE plans across the United States is capped at $15,000 unless an individual has earned income and doesn't contribute to an employer plan. They can contribute beyond that $15,000. But let's say there is an inheritance or an insurance settlement, something that's over $15,000. Well, that's where they do need to get some legal advice and look at a special needs trust, and that is something that I won't go into in detail. I let the legal counsel review that, but you can pay those legal fees out of your Enable account. End of life expenses, health, prevention, and wellness. I had somebody that their resources would pay for a certain type of glasses. They needed some glasses, but they wanted something that was a little bit more contemporary, they were a little bit more expensive. So they can tap into the Enable Savings Plan of Alabama for health, prevention, wellness, insurance premiums. So those are some really great examples of the qualified disability expenses. And that's why I like to spend a little bit of time on this screen. I was at an event and someone said, oh, I was thinking it was just for education. And she was confusing that with the college savings plan, the 529. This is the 529A, which is specifically for people with disabilities, and it goes beyond education to all these wonderful other practical ways to spend the money. Now that bullet point, the last one, that says other expenses to enhance the account owner's quality of life. I've had so many discussions on this particular one when I do presentations, because sometimes it bothers people because everything does seem to be black and white and needs to be documented so clearly. But this is vague by design because it's really individualized. I helped someone whose son was in need of special dietary products. So that's something that for her is a qualified disability expense. I helped a woman in Alabama, and her daughter had a particular type of shoe that she needed to wear. And that's specific to her and her need. That's a qualified disability expense. So it is vague by design because it does vary from individual to individual. Now I do tell people to keep track in a folder of your expenses and to document what it was used for. So for example, maybe a Best Buy purchase of a computer, just keeping track of that bill or that invoice for your purposes, for your file, and just a small paragraph explaining what that expense was. And the reason I say that is in the event that an individual's tax returns would be audited and they would ask the accountant or the auditor would say, well, now tell me more about this Enable Alabama account and tell me about these expenses So you'd have a folder with all the expenses already documented. I helped someone, actually it was a presentation in Alabama, and we were talking and going over that. But she said that she does a spreadsheet, which is great too, but I do say to keep track of the invoice. Just really comparable to a health savings account. I sent something, this was my fault. I had new glasses. I think it was $20 is all I tapped into for my HSA. And I sent the Visa receipt. Well, that wasn't good enough. I know better. They wanted the entire invoice. So I compare it a little bit to that type of documentation. When an individual does a withdrawal, they are not taxed if it's one of these qualified disability expenses. They're tax-free withdrawals. But I do tell people to keep track in a folder of the withdrawals. When a request is made to do a withdrawal, they're actually all coded as qualified disability expenses. So it's actually up to the owner or the responsible individual to code it differently, but hopefully it falls into one of those categories. I know I spent a lot of time on that, but I really like to give examples of how this can be used. I think it's helpful for people to know, oh, I can do it for, like cell phone is always an aha moment. It's like, oh, a cell phone or a computer or iPad, those are all considered qualified disability expenses. So now we'll move to the next slide. I spent a lot of time on that. So SSI benefits. So individuals that receive SSI, they can actually contribute year after year. Perhaps they chose an account that earns interest, but when it hits $100,000, benefits will be suspended. So that is another dollar amount to keep in mind, is SSI is capped at $100,000. The other thing on this slide is qualified expenses for housing must be spent in the same month or it's considered as income to the account owner for SSI resources. All right, next slide. I had somebody ask me this yesterday. Impact to Medicaid. Assets in an account are an excluded resource for Medicaid. However, of course, people have to do the reporting and will likely, they do need to include the ABLE, will likely need to do this annually, perhaps more, but they do need to include the ABLE quarterly statement as well. And wages are subject to existing Medicaid guidelines. All right, next slide. Medicaid reimbursement. So I do need to point out that if in the event an individual who has an account passes away, the state has a right to recapture. I'm gonna take a little sip of water, excuse me, just one moment. So the state has a right to file a claim only during the duration that they have Medicaid and the Enable account. However, I do like to point out that any end-of-life expenses or outstanding hospital expenses can be paid first before the state would have a right to recapture any funds. So that's been a discussion when I do presentations, and if the account size is getting rather large, again, it's capped at $15,000 per year, then that is another time that an individual may want to discuss a special needs trust with an attorney. I was doing a presentation with families in Nebraska, and they said that they have a special needs trust and they also have an Enable account. So we can work in concert with attorneys, and an individual can have both. And definitely, if the account size is getting large, they could certainly look at doing that because of this Medicaid reimbursement clause. But I always like to repeat, I'm saying a second time, that funeral expenses and any outstanding hospital expenses, that can be paid first. I was actually dialed into a conference the other day, and they said they were not aware of any Medicaid recapture claims to date yet as far as the plans. So we don't think, it's a fairly new plan across the United States, but we're not aware of any recapture or reimbursements that have occurred so far. All right, next slide. Okay, now we're going to drill down into the Enable Savings Plan of Alabama. Next slide, sorry, flexible. Anyone can contribute to the account. I mentioned that GoFundMe account that was liquidated and started the first plan in Alabama. It can be family members, friends, account owners, trusts can actually funnel into this. So anyone can contribute to an account. We covered that slide of wide range of disability expenses. The assets can be withdrawn anytime. Now, when I say that they're subject to tax penalties, that's only if it's not a qualified disability expense. So hopefully it falls into one of those categories. Sorry, barking dog. I'm going to excuse myself for just a sec. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so barking dog, that happened last time. I'm so sorry. The good news too with Alabama, it is a nationwide plan, so anyone can contribute. I'm going to look at some stats and share some stats too on Alabama. 80% of the assets in the Alabama plan are from individuals that are in Alabama. So I think that's an interesting statistic. However, anyone from another state can contribute to the Alabama plan since it's a nationwide plan. Gifting is a really easy way for others to contribute to the account. I love that little graphic at the bottom with the little piggy bank. That is on our website. So if it's a birthday, holiday, special occasion, someone can easily go onto the website and do a contribution and do a gift for the individual to their account. All right, next slide. Low fees. So that's something else I'm going to share with you right now. There's, I think I've mentioned 42 states that offer a plan, and we're about right in the middle. The fees range from $36 to $60, and our plan is about in the middle. It's a $45 annual fee, breaks down to $11.25 per quarter. There are low asset-based fees that range from 0.50 to 0.55 for Vanguard investments. And we'll drill down a little bit more on the investments in just a couple slides. But there's no additional enrollment fee, investment change fee, or distribution fee. All right, next slide. Contributions. So the initial minimum contribution is $50. It's reduced to $25 if someone does an automatic deposit or a payroll deposit. The subsequent minimum contribution is $25. However, that's waived if you do an automatic. It's really easy to contribute online. You can do it automatically from a checking or savings account. It can be also, checks can be mailed into the plan. Wire transfer, I do say there's no wire fee on our side, but I do tell people if you are going to do a wire to check the outgoing fee to see if there's a fee associated with that. Now, in some cases someone might still want to do that if it's a large amount, because a wire transfer would expedite that. Payroll deduction or electronic funds transfer are a couple other ways to contribute to the account. And I know I've mentioned this a few times, it's capped at $15,000, but the employed account owner who has earned income can contribute as long as they're not doing an employer plan. All right, next slide. So there are tax benefits. I mentioned that on the very first slide that it is a tax advantage savings account. The earnings are tax deferred while in your account if you choose an account that earns interest, and they're tax free if used for qualified disability expenses. Now this little paragraph explains if it's not qualified, it's subject to federal and state income tax and an additional 10% federal penalty. But again, with that long list, hopefully it falls into one of those categories. And then contributors, other than the account owner, can take advantage of a state tax benefit. So that's another tax advantage. All right, next slide. Oh, here's where we get into investments. So there are 3 target risk investment options. They are not FDIC insured, so they could lose value. They are low-cost mutual funds, and the time horizon is over 5 years. So there is a pie chart that goes over the growth moderate and conservative option. It shows the breakdown on our website, and also in a program disclosure statement. It goes into a little bit more detail as far as what those are comprised of. Now I'm going to mention something else too in Alabama that would be interesting. So the top 3 investment choices, I should say, in Alabama is the growth option. So this Vanguard growth option is actually has the most money in it, breakdown wise. Checking account and savings fall right after that. So that is how the individuals in Alabama have been investing the money in the Alabama plan. I thought that was kind of interesting to share with you. Okay, next slide. We do have 2 FDIC options. And one is the bank savings option, and that does provide FDIC coverage, and that is for a time horizon of less than 5 years. The checking account option is also FDIC insured. So those are 2 options for individuals that are concerned about FDIC coverage. And they're also, time horizon is less than 5 years. The checking account option is a really great, convenient way for individuals to access the funds. There is a debit card that's automatically issued so that they can easily do transactions. Again, I just say to keep in mind to keep track of the withdrawals, but it is very convenient as far as ease of use. Now, definitely if it's in a Vanguard fund or bank savings option, you can do withdrawals at any time. You can request a check to the account owner or a check to a third-party vendor, or if an account is linked to the Enable Alabama account, you can move money electronically. So you can withdraw anytime from any investment. The checking account just has that advantage of that debit card. All right, next slide. So the other thing to drill down into investments is you can separate that out. You can say 50% growth, 50% bank savings option, for example. So you can do, you know, a couple different options, or you could do 100% in one, and you can change investment allocations twice per year. So if your plans change, your investment selection can change along with your plans. Next slide, please. Enrollment. I talked about this a little bit early on, that it is really pretty easy to enroll. We do ask that people read the disclosure statement, which is online. You would choose your investment option, and then we do capture the information for the account owner. And if there is a guardian or interested party, I should say responsible party, we do need to gather their information as well. All right, next slide. Common questions and answers. So what is the Alabama Guardian legislation? So we could advance slides, and that should flood into the answer to that. If you'd like to go to the next slide. Yes, the Guardian legislation is very important legislation that passed that affords guardians the right to open, invest, and manage the Alabama account on behalf of individuals with disabilities. The withdrawal of funds, we talked about that already too, that you can request a check or transfer it to a bank account on file. And the only the beneficiary contribute money to the account. And we talked about that actually as well, that the account owner's family, friends, trust, payroll can go into the account as long as the amount does not exceed $15,000. All right, next slide. And I apologize if you can hear my barking dog in the background. Website. So this is our website. We do keep a lot of relevant information. We have a COVID tab. So we are updating that as we speak. This actually is a slide that talked about that HUD guidance letter. But right now, if you went to that website, we are going to be updating with some COVID information. And what we are putting on the website right now is something that I will mention to you the stimulus checks that many people have already received, that can be added to the Enable Savings Plan of Alabama. But one thing that's really important to note is that the funds need to be used within 12 months or it will be counted as income. And I talked to someone about that the other day and he said, oh, I don't know how we're going to use that. And I said, well, if there's like a big purchase, you know, the computer, he talked about how his child, adult child, is actually in assisted living type of a situation. So perhaps it can be used for the housing expenses. But one thing that they did come up with, and this wasn't mentioned initially, is that the funds need to be used within 12 months. Very important to note. And that is our website, enableal.com. And if you want to check that, from time to time, we do keep important information on there. And this is a really robust site. You can enroll online unless you are the guardian, power of attorney, conservatorship. But it has information as far as the investments that we talked about, the ABLE Act. So it really has a lot of great information. All right, next slide. We do have a great Facebook page too. We put a lot of great stories, tie it into, kind of what's going on and what's relevant. So like us on Facebook, Enable Savings Plan Alabama. All right, next slide. Yes, I'm repeating myself here, enablealabama.com. That is our website. We have a lot of great blogs that we share on our resource pages. We also try to keep relevant information and news on the website. And the 800 number that's listed there, that's our customer service folks. So I am your outreach specialist, and I'm happy to do presentations, help people with enrollment. If somebody needs a copy of a statement or maybe wants to do an investment allocation change, they can either do it online on their Enable account or they can call that customer service line. And they're open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Central. And that email address is a general mailbox that I answer. However, when I send everyone this PowerPoint, you will have my contact information as well. All right, next slide. Oversight. So yes, I am very heavily regulated compliance-wise because I work for First National Bank, and I also work in concert with your state treasurer's office. So this slide is our oversight page. Again, it has your state treasurer information on there as well as the Nebraska state treasurer. And then the next two slides are really my compliance slide as well. We have to have disclosures that discuss that those FDIC products are insured, but the Vanguard funds are not and may lose value. So those, these next two slides are just disclosure slides since I'm regulated compliance-wise. And I think if we just keep scrolling, we are going to hit my last final page that says, thank you very much. I am going to share with you before we open it up for questions. I wanted to share some stats across the United States because ABLE plans are gaining momentum. So I'm really excited about that. I mentioned that there are 42 states that offer a plan. There are 56,632 accounts across the United States. The average account size is 6,265. The asset size across the United States is 354 million. Alabama is really growing, and I'm really, really proud of Alabama. 1.9 million. So that is a really great number. Alabama had an anniversary with cake, and we celebrated an anniversary earlier this year. So Alabama is growing momentum, and by doing presentations like this, Maria, I want to thank you because that's how I help get the word out is, doing presentations and doing outreach and letting people know how they can use the account. I'm going to just take a quick little look, but I think I covered my extra notes that I made. And so now I would just open it up 2 questions.
Well, thank you so very much for this information. There are a couple of questions that came on a private chat, but at this time, I will unmute everybody. So if you want to ask a question, but one of the questions that it was submitted, it was like, can this account help a student that will be attending post-secondary education at the university and help with the purchases of books? He is on the spectrum.
Yes, yes. So for education, that's a good question. It would cover tuition, books, if they need any supplies, like if there's a lab, supplies, computer. So definitely all those costs with school would be included.
Okay, and I have another question. My child has a disability, multiple disabilities. She received SSI, and currently, because she is older, we have a hard time of trying to buy diapers. Can this account cover diapers? Can I buy that under this account?
Yes, that would be the, I would say could fall under one of 2 categories, either kind of like that health prevention wellness category or other expenses that enhance the account owner's quality of life. So definitely I would say either of those 2 categories.
Okay, now the floor is open for questions. If any of the attendees have a question.
I have a question, Ms. Stewart.
Yes.
This is Dr. Hill. What about families that speak languages other than English?
That's a good question. So I did have that the other day, and this was specific, and I can follow up with you on that. It was specific to someone who spoke Spanish, that when someone calls the customer service line, that they are able to get a translator, but I would need to check and see, if they are able to tie in with other languages. I do not know. I specifically had one for someone who was Spanish speaking and needed a translator, and they can call in and get assistance with our customer service folks. So they dial that in. But Dr. Hill, I will find out. I'm going to make a note of that. If, depending on various languages, are they able to pull in a translator depending on, different types of languages? So let me check on that for you, and I can follow up on that. The materials are in English. We have not had them converted into different languages, but I do know that we do have individuals that can be pulled in for translation, but I'll check and see if that covers, which languages that covers, I should say.
Because I know for our area going down the I-85 corridor, while English, Spanish, and Korean seem to be the most prevalent languages in this area. In fact, Dr. Saw's on here. She's done some work with us for families who speak Korean. So
yes, I can check on that.
I think
that's perfect. That's a good question, because I had that not even that long ago that I called and I checked with customer service. So I will follow up with you on that.
I have another question that came on the private chat. It says, I am not very knowledgeable about investments. How can we get advice so that we could decide which one is the best option?
Yes, that's a very good question. So I would answer that in a couple ways. One is on that website, on the top, there was an investment tab. And if you click on the investment tab, off to the left, and actually that would be the website, but you could, if you wanted to pull that up, that's perfect. So on the web, yeah, perfect. And I don't know if it'll be interactive, but if you click on investment on the left-hand side, it shows pricing and performance. So an individual can look at that and say, oh, okay, this is how this investment has performed. Now, of course, the market's been kind of all over the place this year. So I do tell people to maybe perhaps look at, since the inception of the account, how has it performed, especially if someone's looking at a long-term horizon for their investment. They could look and see how, for example, how has the growth Vanguard fund, how has it performed? So they could look at the performance. The other thing is I do tell people that if they have an investment advisor, that they could certainly share this information or have the advisor take a look at this and say, for your family and your situation, this is what I would recommend for you. So I've had people who have done that as well. So that would be two ways to help make a determination. The other thing is that program disclosure statement, I think, goes into some great detail because the Vanguard funds would be on like a long-term horizon, a little bit more of a risk tolerance. So I think it's dependent upon someone's risk tolerance and time horizon as to what is the best option for them. I talked to someone one day and they really were concerned with FDIC coverage. They only wanted something that was FDIC insured. So for them, it would be checking or savings. If it's someone that is going to school and they want the ease of the debit card, then that checking account would be a good option for them. So I think that that program disclosure statement and the website are two great resources. Sometimes people like to know, what have other people done in my state? That's why I thought I would mention that the statistics show, I'm going to repeat that, growth, checking, and savings are the three most popular options in Alabama. But again, that's just kind of what Alabamians have done. But it really would be contingent upon their particular situation, what would be best for them. That was a long answer, but kind of different resources. And if they would have an advisor or an accountant, certainly they could have someone take a look and give a second opinion.
Perfect. That was great information. I have another question.
Yes.
Do we have to have a legal status in order to access this kind of account? But my son was born in the US. I guess, does the legal status, if you're gonna open it up for your loved one, but your migratory status is not established, will that create any conflicts?
No, are you saying status of a resident in the United States?
Yes, as a US
yes.
citizen.
Yes, I'll double check that. And that's another one that when I email the PowerPoint and they answer to Dr. Hill's question, but I believe it is for a US citizen. I think that is in the program disclosure statement, but I'll check on that.
Okay.
Now, the other question I was thinking that they were meaning is if they have legal documentation that their power of attorney or guardian is that what they meant, or did they mean citizen of the United States?
Citizen of the United States.
Okay, gotcha.
The child is born here, but parents they're not U.S. citizens yet.
Okay, gotcha. I'll double check that because the owner would be a U.S. citizen, but the parents are not. Is it a minor child?
Yes.
Okay, I'll check that though. I will check.
And not just to send to this question, I'm just thinking, like for example, if the parents have a green card or might be, not having access to have a green card, but the child still is a U.S. citizen. Is there any regulations to that?
I'll check on that a little further. I'll check on as far as the green card status. So I will follow up. I'll check on that and follow up. Yeah, good question.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else from our attendees that have any questions for Ms. Stewart?
I have a question about the qualification for enrollment. If, for example, like if I have a cancer, so I might need a treatment more than 12 months. And the doctor said that I need, to be on the treatment longer than 12 months. Then am I qualified?
Do you know that that is a good question. So that doctor certification, I'm going to actually, could we go back to that and just look at that slide, Maria? Do you mind awfully?
Is that the one at the bottom?
It is actually, I want to say, let me look because I've got a print off version as well. Eligibility, it is like slide 4, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to take a look at that and see. And I'm going to step away for just one sec.
Probably she means at the very beginning.
Okay, so sorry. Yes, I want to say page 4.
Yes.
Yes, okay, let's look at that again. So certification from a physician indicating he or she has a marked or severe functional limitation which is expected to result in death or has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. So I would say that that could be considered an eligible individual, again, with that doctor's certification, and we do not need a copy of the doctor's certification. The definition of disability is the Social Security PALMS definition, but then we have this other category of the certification from a physician. So I would say that to answer your question and kind of reading that, you know, clearly, I would say yes to your question. But then I wanted to kind of go just a step further and say that the definition is the Social Security PALMS definition of a disability, which is a really detailed definition. But I think to answer your question, I would say yes to that.
Mm-hmm.
I helped a young man. Oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. No, anybody else that has any other questions? I know that sometimes people might feel more inclined to email with private, more detailed questions, and that is totally okay with you, right, Ms. Stewart?
Oh, for sure. Because what I'll do, if you all don't mind, when I get your email address, it's from Maria, then I will go ahead and send this PowerPoint so you have this for your reference. And then I will look into a couple of those questions as far as language, and then the question as far as the green card. And if you have a separate question you'd like to email me, feel free. If there's anyone that you think would like to visit a little bit further on this or would like a presentation. And again, kind of with this virtual world that we're in, I do help people very frequently with that enrollment form. We just go page by page and go over all the details of the enrollment form. So I'm happy to help with that as well.
Well, I do want to say that I'm so grateful that we have resources like this available for families and professionals that want to learn more about the Enable Act in Alabama. And, you know, I have visited your Facebook. I mean, it has tons of information in the website as well. And so this is a great resource for us to know more about this great opportunity for families, you know, because we didn't have this in the state of Alabama. And Alabama has done a great job about having this opportunity for families and caregivers, you know, securing funding for to have access for other services. So I'm so happy.
Well, and I have done some conferences, and Anita Kelly, who works for the state treasurer's office, if you all know Anita, she does a great job of outreach in Alabama. As the outreach specialist, typically I make trips to Alabama and do presentations, but this year, as we all know, has been challenging, and sadly so many conferences and everything is just on hold and postponed.
Mm-hmm.
But typically I do love to make trips out to Alabama. I've got some family in the Birmingham area, so I'd love to go to Alabama, and Anita is a great resource as well, and she does a lot of the outreach, and she's just been a great partner from the state treasurer's office. She's wonderful.
So would she also do outreach presentations if we needed?
She does. She does. We tag team. So I'm going to say, forget this year because this year is crazy, but in the past and going forward, we tag team. So if I've been, like, there was a couple in March. So, well, not March, that would not be a good example. In February, she did a couple conferences. She does the Governor's Fair on Disabilities every year. If I was already at a conference and flew to Alabama, then Anita will go to events, especially, you know, any kind of event that we can do a presentation is wonderful. And if we can do a presentation and also do an exhibitor booth. So we've worked together really well on, you know, covering the basis and doing the outreach piece.
Mm-hmm. I have two more questions that just came up. One of them is, how long does it take for the account to be opened up? And also, if you open this kind of account, should you close any other counts like for any other account, like a saving account, just for tax purposes?
So good questions. So if an individual, oh, I just saw Anita's in your building. I love her. Isn't she awesome? Sorry. So if an individual is enrolling online, it is a really quick process. So I had somebody that opened an account and she called me and said, are you able to get my account number? I want to make a deposit she was going to actually mail in a check. And she opened the account online. I was able to actually see it. I want to say it was later that day or the next day. Now, when there is legal paperwork, that does go to legal counsel within a census. So First National is the program manager, and we have a record keeper that does the review of accounts. They have a legal department that reviews accounts. They do our statements. That's the 800 number, is that entity called a census. So if there's legal paperwork involved, it usually is 24 to 48 hours because they want to take a look at the legal paperwork and make sure everything is in order. One thing I want to mention too, and I'm sorry, every question has a long answer because it's a great product, but it does seem like there's all these different ways to answer the question. So if an individual has a guardian and their paperwork, I've seen this in Nebraska, their paperwork says no ATM withdrawals, then the checking account is not going to be an option for investments, unfortunately, because the verbiage in the legal paperwork I've seen in my area says no ATM card. That's just a side comment. But typically 24 to 48 hours, if it's legal documentation, it could just be a little bit longer than that. But they will get notification either online or paper, however they would like to be communicated with, that the account's open, this is the account number, welcome to the Enable Savings Plan Alabama. So that answers that question, I believe. The other question is, I would say if an individual has a bank account that they may, and again, it's up to them, but they may want to keep that bank account open. The reason I say that is because many times when there is a rep payee account with Social Security funds, Social Security typically direct deposits to a rep payee account. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get confirmation on if it can go right to Enable. We've not heard confirmation from Social Security if it can go directly to the Enable Alabama account. So that's why, unfortunately, there is kind of that conduit account, if you will. So for direct deposit purposes, it's good to have. If an individual, though, is concerned about that, that limit, they could always set up an automatic transfer and make sure that that working checking account does not ever exceed that $2,000 limit. I had somebody the other day and she said, I'm just going to put everything in the Enable account. That's really what she wanted to do. And that's entirely up to her. But I do see an advantage of having a working bank account as well for like direct deposit purposes. But on the enrollment form, you can write down the individual or their authorized individual can include on the enrollment form that bank account information. So funds can easily be transferred electronically from their bank account into their Enable Alabama account, or when they need the money, it can be transferred out. So I think there's advantages, but again, it is up to the individual what they would like to do.
I have another question that came up. Will there be a conflict if the person has an account on their country of origin? If they,
as far as, I don't think that there would be. The only thing I'm wondering though is for the electronic funds transfer. I don't know if they can do an international electronic funds transfer. So I can check on that, because if they're wondering if they can have that listed, but it's a different country, I would need to double check on that. But that's another question I'll answer. Were they thinking of having it linked to the Enable account?
No, I guess the question is more like if they came from another country, but in that country, grandma set up an account for the child, so they have an account.
Yeah, I don't think, I don't think, nope, that should not at all. The only thing I was going to check is if they wanted to have that linked to their Enable Alabama account, could they move money back and forth? And I don't know if they could because of the international piece. But if that's not the question, they just want to know if they have another account. The only thing though is that, individuals that have to do reporting do need to report their assets. So I would think that wherever that account would reside, they just would not be able to exceed, $2,000 if they're receiving government benefits and are held to a minimum.
Okay, perfect. Now,
it's always go ahead.
There's another question. Okay, can an individual have access and apply for a Visa or MasterCard? Is credit
it is
an issue?
Yeah, the debit card on that checking account, it's actually a MasterCard debit card. So it functions as a point of sale card. So if they are at Best Buy, it would function as a MasterCard in that capacity. And then they can use ATMs too and do a withdrawal from an ATM. Now, if they get a card, it is automatically issued with the checking account. Unfortunately, only the checking account issues the debit card. And then they will get information as to how to find out where ATMs are in their area. The entity that we used for the checking account is called Fifth Third Bank. And they will send a link that says, by looking at this link and entering your zip code, you will know what ATMs are in your area, because they actually have a huge number of ATMs. And I did it just to test it with my zip code, and they were all over the place. They were at Target. I mean, I think I had like 23 ATMs in a 5-mile radius of my house, or maybe it was a 10-mile radius. But it does function as both. So it's a MasterCard debit card for point of sale, and it's an ATM card. And that's why, though, if there's that verbiage in the legal documentation that says no ATM card, that's why they can't choose the checking account option, unfortunately.
So will this be, this is a question that just came that I just thought about it. So like, for example, when you travel international, right? And if I want to use my personal credit card, like Discover, sometimes I need to call in advance to let them know that I'm going to be out of the country.
Yes.
And I'm going to use that. So in this case, could that have to be the same? That you have to let them know?
Yes, I always do too. I think that's a good question. Yes, if they were going to travel abroad, I would say to contact Fifth Third Bank is the bank that issues our card, and just let them know. I think that's a good idea, and I do that too. I even do that when I'm traveling just to a different state. I don't think that they're quite as strict within the United States, but if I'm going to travel out of town, I usually just say, hey, I'm going to be in Florida for 5 days. I might be using my ATM card, but definitely international, I would say. And then they just make a note on the system that says traveling to, London, during this time period. So then they know to authorize those transactions.
Okay, perfect. Well, does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I want to say that, on behalf of the Auburn University Regional Autism Network, we appreciate your time and all this information. Thank you for what you guys are doing, and making sure the families are learning about this great resource that we have, and again, thank you. I hope that everybody stays healthy and safe.
Yes. And
we are continue to, we want to continue bringing some sources of information for families during this time. And please tap into different resources. We are sending emails with links about different topics. Let us know if you have any questions. And please feel welcome to email Ms. Stewart if you have any follow-up questions. As soon as we end it, we'll be sending the PowerPoint to you guys. And thank you so very much. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Do you want to say anything else?
I just want to say, Maria, thank you so much for having me. As I mentioned before, this is the highlight of my day when I can do outreach. It looks differently, but it's still the same impact. So I just appreciate you letting me Zoom in today, and thank you for your technical support too. I really appreciate that. And I apologize for my barking dog. I had to get her out of the room. Well, and for your recording, I hope there's like this dog barking in the background the whole time. Oh
Well,
my goodness.
These are different times and we are all learning, and that is totally okay, you know?
I have a
Dr.
quick
Hill, do you want to say something?
Yes. First of all, thank you for this. It's very beneficial. But I had a quick question I was wondering after you stopped recording and we were finished before you left regarding a grant that might assist with, getting information out to families. So that's why I'm going to hope you'll hang on for a minute after you stop recording.
I'm going to stop recording right now. Hold on just a second, please.
Yeah, we're just working on an outreach grant. Oh, it's still recording.
Still, I'm trying to.
It's okay. This is a target. Since you're here, I wanted to ask you, and I figured this would be a